information.
Be that guy, man. Don't be the
it
other guy.
all comes around, man. It's like karma.
Yeah,
it's like, I think it's cold-blooded to not tell somebody.
No. I don't think anybody ever grows up saying, I'm going to be a title officer, right?
You don't want to buy a property where you have all of a sudden someone comes knocking on your door and saying, hey, I got a lien on this property.
You got to make money, right?
But I present myself as a resource.
We'll pull up the deed, and the deed was recorded without a title company.
So if one party passes away, their state's going to be probated. Their percentage of ownership is going to be probated.
When you do put a property into a trust, would that automatically trigger a reassessment?
For the most part, those liens will attach. The trust won't protect you from them.
What's your opinion on AI in terms of like how it's going to change the title insurance business? Today I got a guy that hopefully we're going to learn a lot from today. Former title officer, Rod, welcome.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm in the real estate and the real estate of mind.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 9 of the Real Estate of Mind podcast. Happy to have you guys back. Today I got a guy that hopefully we're going to learn a lot from today. He's a former title officer, and now he's a title sales officer or title rep, and he's going to explain to us, of course, all what that is. Today we got Rod Grishaber. Rod, welcome.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Rod. So yeah, guys, we got a former title officer. So a lot of people, they don't even know. We'll just get right into title insurance in the beginning. A lot of people, because I'm talking about fees to people and like, escrow and title, and they're like, they say yeah, but like, I already know a lot of people don't know what title insurance is. So if you could just briefly explain what exactly is title insurance.
It's funny because it is always a difficult thing to explain. Even after explaining it, people still don't really understand kind of what it is, right? The easiest way I can explain it is a couple ways. So one, it's if you're buying a house, right? Or let's compare it to other insurance policies. So you got life insurance, medical insurance, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Most of those policies, you're going to pay a fee, and you're going to pay either a monthly fee, annual fee, or whatever. It's like an ongoing fee, so It's covering you into the future. The thing that's different about title insurance is it's a one-time fee, it's paid at closing, and basically it's covering you from that date of closing and anything into the past. So if you're a buyer, you don't want to buy a property where you have all of a sudden someone comes knocking on your door and saying, hey, I got a lien on this property, or, I used to be an owner of this property and I never deeded off. So now they're going to sue you, right?
To take the property back.
Right, or whatever, or say they got a lien on that property. Uh-huh. But if you have that title insurance policy, that's covering you. So now you basically take that policy to that title company and say, hey, I got this guy saying that I owe money on this property. You guys gave me this policy. Now you guys take care of it. And so in a nutshell, that's kind of what it is. It's a policy that, again, one-time fee at the time of closing and covers you into the past. There's small little coverages that will cover into the future, but primarily it's, covering you into the past versus these other types of policies cover you more so into the future. So, it's liens, forgeries, ownership, anything that could come up, but the title company has to do their due diligence to research that whole chain of title. So basically what they do is they go back into the past, normally from when the builder first sold that property, mm-hmm. and they trace the steps from that point forward in order to be able to make sure everything looks clean and they can give what people like to call free and clear title to that buyer. Mm-hmm. And like sometimes people will say, hey, I'm a buyer, do I even need title insurance?
That was one of my questions. Because we have some cheap people out there, and they like, oh, why do I have to exactly? So why do I have to even get this policy? I don't want it. Like, I'm good. Like, I own this house.
Right. So in California, at least 90% of the time, whatever, the seller's paying for the homeowner's policy for that buyer anyway. So if I'm a buyer, there's no reason to turn it down. Yeah. Sometimes you might get family members selling to each other, and then that seller, he's like, hey, I don't want to pay for a title policy. Let's just do a deed. It's up to them. I mean, they don't technically have to get title insurance. They can just sign a deed and deed it. But that person that's on title, they're on the hook if there's any liens against that prior owner, mm-hmm. or even owners before them, just depending on if there was title insurance, So to me, it's a no-brainer. I mean, you really need it. Like, it's a security blanket.
Yeah. Yeah. And these are all for home purchases. What about on a refinance? What happens on a refinance with title insurance?
Right. So there's basically, I mean, there's other types of policies, but there's, two types of title policy. There's a homeowner's policy and a lender's policy. The lender's policy, like on a refinance, it's covering the lender. So it's covering their position. So if you're making a payoff on one existing loan, paying that off and putting on your new loan, you're saying, hey, we're doing this new loan, we're going to be in first position. So by us issuing a title policy to that lender, mm-hmm. we're stating that, hey, they're in first position. There's no other liens that have priority. So those other liens, if there were, they could possibly, if it's like, let's say we miss one, someone could foreclose on that property and wipe out your new loan. So by having that title policy for the lender, it protects you as the lender, your position.
And I mean, I know that, title policies and title officers, and everybody makes mistakes in insurance. So do you know any examples of things that could go wrong with the property? I know you kind of discussed them, but like if you could just give a quick example of what can go wrong where an insurance company is essentially having to pay on a claim. Again, I know you discussed them, but can you just think of another?
Yeah, it could. It's just pretty simple. The most common one is probably a missed lien, right? Like some sort of lien that maybe it didn't get posted to the chain of title correctly. Maybe it was misposted and title just missed it for whatever reasons. Title did all their examination, did all their research, but for whatever reason they missed it. And now all of a sudden you'll see maybe they'll record a notice of default out of nowhere, or they're going to send a letter saying, hey, we owe money. And now that new homeowner is saying, hey, I got this letter in the mail from someone. That's really, the biggest one. I mean, and again, there's also ownership. That's a big one too. So maybe someone's an heir of the property. Sometimes maybe even the property was in a trust and a beneficiary of that trust maybe got left out. Mm-hmm. And they're like, hey, I was a beneficiary. The trust sold the property. I wasn't even aware of this. I'm gonna come after you. Well, now they're coming after the title company more so than coming after the new buyer. So.
And so these title insurance companies, again, you brushed on it a little bit, but do you guys operate the same way as other insurance companies? Because it is insurance at the same kind of thing. I know you pay, but you're saying you only pay one fee, but I'm talking about more on the back end. Do you guys kind of operate? Are you under the same regulatory body? Because I know that insurance companies also, don't they take your premiums and basically invest those, and that's kind of how they make money?
I'm not 100% on that. Now you're going past anything that I've dealt with because you got to understand, like for me being a title officer, we're dealing with the current files on hand.
You don't get into the business.
We don't get into that side of it too much. So that one I really wouldn't be able to answer for you.
No, it's all good. Now, obviously being a title officer or being a title rep now, I want to get, we'll kind of backtrack a little bit. We're going to get a little bit into your background. I don't think anybody ever grows up saying, I'm going to be a title officer, right? So
not at all.
I don't know if you could kind of, let's go over your story a little bit. Cause I got into my business. I never thought I would be doing what I'm doing now. But how did you get into being a title officer and now a title rep?
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. At least it's interesting to me.
Yeah.
Originally I just needed a job, and I had a friend that worked at a title company, got me a job, started pulling documents from the old microfiche machines, and then pretty quickly I got bumped up to customer service. Started doing customer service there. Wasn't a big fan of the company I was at. Wasn't really a fan of just, being in that office, and then left that, started doing something else, and then I ended up coming back to title, started interviewing around different title companies. And I went to one title company that I was at the longest, and I started working as a title assistant. So I started working as a title assistant. I was there for a long period of time. Eventually ended up becoming a title officer. And never thought at all about sales. Part of me always thought, man, I could do that. I always felt like, I knew a good amount about title. I'm friendly with people. People seem to like me out there. I thought I could do good. But, I had 3 kids. I had a steady income, salaried position. And
that's as a title officer.
As a title officer. Yeah. So I never even thought about making any moves. And then one day the company I was with got bought out by another title company, or actually we bought out another title company, but those managers stayed on, And I really didn't like what they were saying. I didn't like, what my assistants were going to lose their commission. And I had been there for 20 years. And I was just like, I asked them to lay me off. And they wouldn't lay me off. And the reason I asked them was because I wanted my severance package, right? I wanted my severance package because I could get my severance package, and then I had other title companies that were offering asking me to come be their title officer and offering me more money than I was making at that time. So to me, it would have been a win-win.
Like double the money, hell.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was almost like a no-brainer, but they wouldn't do it. And so I was frustrated. I sat there and I thought about different things. I even thought about, I'd already taken all my real estate classes. I thought about maybe going into real estate. But then a light bulb kind of went on and I thought, you know what, this is your one opportunity. You always kind of thought you could do good in sales, but you never, this was my one chance to just take a shot at it. And if it didn't work, then I thought I'd just go back and be a title officer somewhere. So I reached out to a title company that had always reached out to me, interviewed me to be a title officer there. And I just said, hey, I'm thinking about going into sales. Maybe put out some feelers and let me know, the response. Like 5 minutes later, the sales manager calls me.
Oh, they're looking for people.
He's like,
they're looking.
I mean, it was a big deal to them. They're like a former title officer switching into sales. Like, they wanted it. They were very interested.
And you're well experienced by this time. You're like
right.
15
So I was
years
20 plus years in. Yeah, 20 plus years in. So I had a ton of title knowledge. And
you should have connections too, a little bit.
I know. That was the thing. And so when you're a title officer, you talk to escrow all day long.
You're right. Now that I'm thinking about it, you're only talking to escrow, and so now your clients are, realtors and mortgage companies, basically, right?
Right. Yeah. But I think some title reps don't understand the value in escrows. Escrows are very good at directing business too. Mm-hmm. And so the first thing I did when my first day in the field is I went out, and it was kind of cool going to these escrow offices that I had been talking to on the phone and email for years, never seen them in person. And just saying, hey, I'm Rod, and like, oh my gosh, like, I know, like I know them very well, but we just never seen each other. So I started, going around and visiting as many of them as I could. And then that way I kind of learned the game. I kind of learned what was going on. I mean, I was just thrown out into the field. I didn't really want training because I already knew the product so well, but I wanted to kind of just get out there and figure it out on my own. Mm-hmm. And so I did. And, little connections here with some, lenders that I had good relationships with, maybe a couple realtors that were close, like the ones that would actually call the title departments. Because like you said, most realtors or loan officers, you're going right to the rep. You're not necessarily calling the title officer, but there were some that did. And so I always would, make sure I jotted their names down so that I could reach out to them. And I just started, and I got the ball rolling, and I started doing well pretty quick.
No, your story kind of reminds me of myself. I got thrown into the fire, and nobody taught me how to do sales, but I knew the product. So it's kind of like similar to you thrown in. I knew some people, and again, your business is the same as mine. It's a relationship business, and if people like working with you, then they'll start giving you those policies.
100%. So, I don't have a sales bone in my body. And it's like I was always wondering though.
It's not even changing a little bit now. You're not even like.
Maybe some people would say it, but in my opinion,
because you gotta sell, you gotta make money, right?
But I present myself as a resource, right?
But I think that's the new sales, like with people are watching us on YouTube and all the social media now. We're trying to give value. Everybody says give value, and then the sales will come. So I think that's the new sales instead of like. Talking about basically about price and I'll discount this and I'll discount this. So anyway,
yeah. And that's what I wanted it to be that way, because I kind of would have cringed out if I had to be salesy to get business, and I probably wouldn't have lasted because I wouldn't have enjoyed it. So it's honestly, it's like a dream job to me. I really love what I do, but it's because I get to do it my way. And most of my clients that use me, they use me because they can call me and say, hey, Rod, this is a situation, can I put you on three-way with my seller, with my clients?
Yeah.
Can you answer this question? And I can usually answer most of their questions on the spot. And so that's the value they're looking for. I might not be for everybody. There might be some people that still don't see that value, and like, that's cool with me. Like, I'm not for everybody, but I know there's a lot of people out there that would love to work with someone that, you know, knows a good amount about title and that can kind of guide them through their transactions. So that's what I try to do.
And yeah, where do you see, like, I know, like you said, you didn't grow up trying to be a title officer. Are you seeing young guys come in? How's your...
Yeah, I mean, the new generation's coming for sure. I mean, I've only been in the sales side for, I think now I'm on my 8th year.
But even the title officer side, because how do you guys essentially like recruit new talent if nobody really knows what this is?
Yeah, so from a sales side,
yeah,
I can see the new generations coming because they see social media is a big thing in our industry and they gravitate towards that. A lot of them like the networking events and things like that. So from the sales side, you know, there is a lot of new people coming in. But to answer your other question, like the title officer part, yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, there are people that are, you know, learning and growing, but to be a title officer and, you know, if
they're
you
usually
just,
older, right?
They're usually older. I mean, they don't have to be, not all of them, but like there are, and there's a lot retiring.
Because like you said, you went from a title assistant to a junior. To
Oh,
all
it
that
takes
stuff.
time.
Yeah.
But there are some title companies that will put someone in a title officer seat and just say, okay, you know, you have a little bit of knowledge. We're going to help you with what you need. And they kind of learn on the spot. But for the most part, you really want to work with a really strong title officer. And I'll tell you, the title officer that I work with, I mean, he's also one of my best friends. So I've worked with him, sat next to him for 20 years at one of my former title companies. And now he's with me at my current company. And he was with me at the company I was before, his whole team. So there's a lot of value in having a great title officer, and there's a lot of value in having a title officer that escrow officers like to work with, because some of them, you know, they can be grumpy. I was probably a grumpy title officer. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I was probably a grumpy title officer because I'm not gonna say I love being a title officer. I didn't.
It's a lot. It's admin, right?
Yeah, it's stressful. You got wire cutoff times, all these. You're recording documents in all these different counties, and they all have different cutoff times for recording, and so you're managing hundreds of files simultaneously with all these different time frames that you got to keep track of. So it's a stressful job, you know. I mean, I think my title officer probably gets in at 5 a.m, and you know, he works decently late. And we used to say, I used to skip my lunch, skip as many breaks as possible, because if you don't work at a certain pace, you're not getting out of there anytime close to 5. So you have to work at a certain pace in order to go home. And then the next day it starts all over again, and you never know what each day is going to throw at you. It can be one file can take up your whole day, but at the same time you're managing hundreds of files. So
I would never think that job takes that many hours. I'm not going to lie. So I'm learning something new today. That's a grinded out job, man. It's a lot of hours. Look, I mean, I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but I just interviewed a guy who does like home insurance and things like that. I'm trying to find similarities between like other types of insurance and title insurance, because, you know, like we're having a really big issue in California in general with home insurance. But I was going to say, is title in any way the same, where like people have different areas they're only allowed to do title insurance in this area, or is there some companies that will only some companies would insure this condo complex, but this other company won't insure it just because of some other title issue? Or
so, I mean, all title companies are licensed in different states. I mean, we're licensed in California. I can do some national stuff too, but for the most part, you know, it also depends on your underwriters. You know, some people work for a national underwriter, so depending on, you know, usually the big national underwriters can do most all states. And so like I work for a company that, you know, we're a smaller title company, but we have multiple underwriters. So, you know, I can go through a First American, a Fidelity, a Old Republic. I have about 5 or 6 different title companies that I can put my deal in. So, you know, if they do, you know, all 50 states, then, you know, we can do it. But for the most part, I mean, I stick to California as much as possible. That's where all my knowledge is. Every state's different, so there's different rules. Some states are attorney states,
right? Okay.
You know, and so I don't pretend to act like an expert in any other state besides California. I can close transactions in other states. I'm hands-on on my files in California, but when it comes to the other states, I tend to just let them open the order and close it. And if there's any issues, I'll kind of jump in. But the out-of-state stuff, I kind of just let them do it because those title officers know the rules and laws for those states. I know California.
But are some underwriters different? That was one of my other questions. Like, if I get underwriter A and she says no, but underwriter B,
100%. Yeah,
so
there's some that are more
between
liberal and some are super strict. I know. I'm not going
so
to
it's not
mention
all
any
the,
names.
no, I know. So it's all this. So it's not all
Yeah.
the same. Everybody has a different way of underwriting, basically.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, there are some underwriters. Like, there's one, I don't want to give any names, but there's
No,
one
you're good.
one
No names.
one underwriter that I use the most. So most all my files, I default to them. But if for whatever reason they say, hey, no, we can't do this for this, and that reason, then I'll say, okay, let me take it to another underwriter. So, and that's kind of the beauty of having multiple underwriters, because if I work for one national underwriter, you got one chance. If that underwriter says no, then you can't take it anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
I have about, I can't remember the exact number, I'm going to say five different underwriters. So if one says no, I'll go to the other. If they say no, I'll go to the other. And some of them definitely are easier to work with on certain type of situations than others, and some of them can be strict. So depending on the file and depending on that situation we're trying to deal with in that file,
Mm-hmm.
if the one that I default to says no, I usually know which one I should take it to next.
Got it. Yeah. So you just learned that from experience from dealing with these different people.
Exactly.
Basically. So, kind of back to title sticking to title, doing the deeds and things like that, man. We get a lot of files that are where we'll pull up the deed and the deed was recorded without a title company. So some mom and pop drew up the deed. They Mickey Mouse their names all over the paper, and the escrow officer will call me and they're like, oh, this isn't even like a real way to take title. So, what happens in that case when somebody kind of makes up a deed and puts it through the county, not through title, and then we get it? What's the process that you guys have to do on the back end?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So that's basically what we call an uninsured deed. So, and we see it all the time. And sometimes an uninsured deed can be drawn up perfectly, but you do see a lot of deeds where sometimes it's all handwritten.
Yeah, that's the ones I'm talking about.
And
Mickey
sometimes
Mouse. Yeah.
one of the most important things to know when you do drop a deed and record a deed, especially if it's like between family members or whatever it is, it's the way that you hold title. So I'll see a lot of times where people will just deed to, say just their name, but they don't put a status after their name, or maybe it's two people, maybe they're married, but they don't even say husband and wife as joint tenants. Anytime that a deed just has people's names, it will automatically default in California to tenancy in common. So if one party passes away, their state's going to be probated, their percentage of ownership is going to be probated. But I see it all the time. And title companies, when they see an uninsured deed, they're going to want that person who came off title, the grantor, to fill out a statement of information because any liens from them can attach. And they're going to want them to fill out an uninsured deed affidavit, basically stating that, yes, I deeded the property to so-and-so. I knew what I was doing. I wasn't coerced in any way. And so depending on the deed, we might have to do a correction deed to fix whatever mistakes they've made. And I mean, I've seen even attorneys draw up deeds and I'm like, oh man, I don't know why they drew it up this way. But it does happen quite often. I mean, there's uninsured deeds all the time and people really need to be careful. I wish there was a way to, even with like our social media thing, to just kind of reach out to the mass population and say, hey, I know you think you probably know how you're vested on title, but it's really a good idea to call a title company, call me, call whoever, and double check how your title is currently vested because so many times, I mean, even they might not have done anything from back into the 70s and they just have it in their head that they think they know how a title is held, and now someone's passed away and they're like, oh no, we thought the property was in the trust. Right. And then it wasn't in the trust. And so now they're probate and I'm like, okay, I can connect you with one of my probate attorneys if you need help. So yeah, we see that all the time.
Well, if I wanted to go do a deed on my house and I wanted to change it, can I get insurance on that? just on that, or is that
Not necessarily. I mean, you might be able to convince a title company to say, okay, give us a,
because it's like a lot. Is it a lot of work? What's the reason?
It's not a lot of work, but you're going to probably need to send us an appraisal so we get a value of the house, because we have to figure out what's the value, the liability that we're covering. You know,
okay.
You know what I mean? So like if we're in a sales transaction, we know the sales price. So that's going to be the liability on that homeowner's policy. But if you send us, and it's funny, I just had someone call me on this on my way here today. If you send us a appraisal, we can maybe look at that amount and say, okay, we can issue a policy on that. But mostly title companies, refinance transaction or sale transaction, for the most part, is what we want. I mean, there might be ways to get a title insurance just without that, but not necessarily.
Okay, yeah, I know I got that question before, so it's good that you cleared it up. It's really uncommon, basically, to do that.
It is, but I do get asked for it like every once in a while.
I know you brushed up on probate in that last conversation. We'll get into that, but I wanted to first get into like trusts. And for example, I'm in the middle of doing my own trust right now. So when you do put a property into a trust, would that automatically trigger a reassessment? Going from husband and wife to trust of the family, is that going to trigger a reassessment, or can we somehow get around that?
As long as the original trustees of the trust are the exact same people as like the husband and wife. So the way they always say it is, if the proportional interest is the same from the parties that were on title now going into that trust, same thing if you were to put your property into an LLC, right?
Okay.
So if you're going from, let's say, husband and wife, and now you guys are putting it into your LLC, we're going to want to see your operating agreement for that LLC to make sure that the managing members are just those two people. Or not we, but the county will. The county will. And if they see that, then they'll say, okay, yeah, we won't.
So I should take that to the county when I'm filing my deed?
I would. I always tell people all the time, like, anytime you're doing a deed, call the county assessor. Go over it with them. Explain the exact situation you're doing, and they can advise you. I mean, I'll just say, like, Orange County answers the phone pretty quick. LA County, you got to call in the morning. If you call later in the day, you're going to be on hold for an hour. But they'll answer the phone and they'll answer all those questions for you.
Yeah, but anyway, doing the trust should be fine, basically. And I know that trusts are recommended in California, just because of all. Is it just California? Yeah, do you know if it's just California you recommend a trust, or?
I mean, I'm assuming it's.
Or is it
the trust? I don't want to act like an expert, like I said, in other states. I would assume, though, a trust is by far the best for a family, for a husband and wife. In any state would be my guess, but I could be wrong. But for sure for California, I mean, I don't want to give advice on like CPAs should be doing it or contact your attorney. I always kind of have to give that disclaimer. Mm-hmm. But I can always explain the differences, between different ways of holding title for the most part. But there are certain tax implications that someone might want to hold title, maybe not in a trust, or maybe, in tenants in common or husband and wife community property.
You want to go over that really quick? What is all that? Like, what is...
Yeah.
Because I know most people that we work with, they do, when it's a husband and wife, when husband and wife, they usually do joint tenants, or when it's single, they obviously just do single. But then I have one realtor in particular, he always makes his clients do community property with the right of survivorship, and he adds that.
Right.
And I'm like, why is he doing that? Yeah.
So if he really knows what he's doing, he's getting that advice from a CPA, and they have some reason for tax implications. But he might be thinking that because it has the words right of survivorship, that's the correct way to hold title for a husband and wife to avoid probate, which it will avoid probate that way. But the most common is, like you mentioned, husband and wife has joint tenants. And the reason, because joint tenancy has a built-in right of survivorship. It doesn't say it in the vesting, but it has a built-in right of survivorship. So it has to be equal ownership, however many people. It can be husband and wife, or it can be multiple people. But for joint tenancy, it has to be equal. If you're going to buy a property and say there's three of you, but one person's getting 75%, or one person's getting 80%, and the other two are getting just 10%. You can't do joint tenancy. You can't do community property because that's for married couples. So you have to go tenancy in common. So tenants in common, you can put whatever percentages of ownership, but when one person passes away, their portion will get probated.
Okay.
There's like, I can send you flyers and give you more information. That's the basics
Could
of the reason.
Could you put a company and like a person?
So not as joint tenancy.
Like
it has to be real alive people.
Like, XYZ
an LLC
LLC.
can't. No, it has to be that. It'll be basically tenants in common. It'll default to that. No.
But you can. I'm just a general question. It's like one LLC plus, Andriani and the Rod LLC.
Yeah, and an individual and whoever.
You can
put whatever and whatever percentages, but it'll end up falling into tenants in common.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can't do it in any of the other ways.
Okay, yeah. Anyway, we brushed up on probate. Some people might not know what probate is. Do you know what probate is? If you want to go over it just really quick, what is probate? And then we'll after that, we'll just go into an example of what can happen, basically.
Yeah, so I work with a lot of great probate attorneys, but basically if the property does not have a right of survivorship, or if maybe it did, but both parties passed away. But when, someone passes away that's on title and there wasn't that right of survivorship, their portion is going to be probated. It's just that simple. Sometimes people will say, they meant to put the property into the trust and they thought they did, but they didn't, right? And so I always tell them, hey, well, if that's the case, I got great probate attorneys, talk to them, because there's such thing called a Hegstad petition that they could do. It's a form of probate, but it's a lot simpler, quicker, less expensive form of probate that they could do. Is, they probably have to show proof that they have that trust, and the court has to approve the Hegstad. But that's basically what it is. And the probate process takes a long time and it's very expensive. So,
it's a new word for me, though. What was that word? The
Hegstad petition.
Hegstad petition.
I did a video on it, so go to my social media. I have a video. I even had an attorney I didn't know that saw it, and he reached out and said, "Hey, man, you covered it all. You did a good job."
You did a good job. Yeah. So that you're saying. So I just learned something new. That's basically a probate. But a cheaper way of doing a probate.
Yeah, it's still a form of probate. It's just less expensive,
still
less time
courts.
consuming. Yeah, I think they can be done. And don't quote me on this, but maybe in a month or 1 to 3 months, or maybe I'm wrong on that. But I know they're a lot quicker and a lot less expensive than a full-blown probate.
Because probates, people can hold it up. They can.
Oh yeah, it can take years. Technically, depending on the situation. So, but again, joint tenancy for husband and wife is a great way to, avoid that.
Unless both parties pass away.
Yeah. Correct. Then it's probate.
Then we're in for some problems.
And that's why, for that exact reason is why people will normally recommend putting the property into the trust. Yeah. Because then in the trust you can state, okay, upon our death, here's all our beneficiaries. This is, how much each person gets. This is the person that can sign on behalf of the successor trustee. And, that's, in my opinion, no legal advice. That would be the best way to hold title.
Into a trust in California.
Correct.
Yeah, and we can move. Yeah, and you can move into a trust like you just talked about after we buy the house, and it won't trigger anything as long as let the county know, and you should be good.
Yeah, and one thing I've seen, and you probably have this happen since you do refinances, is a lot of lenders, if you're doing a refinance, they don't want you to hold the property in the trust for the loan, which is fine. You can take the property out of the trust, do your loan, and then put the property right back into the trust. But some people forget to either put it back in the trust, or they assume that it was put back into the trust, and that's where that whole Hegstad thing gets popular.
Well, so a quick question came to mind. Because the property's in a trust usually has a trust is its own entity, right? It has its own EIN, and it's almost like a company, almost in a way. Can somebody come back and put a lien on, the house, even though it's in a trust, or can somebody basically sue you and
Yeah,
try to take that property even though it's in a trust.
Yeah, trust doesn't. And again, this is for. I always have to
Okay,
say,
again,
the
it's not
CPA
legal advice,
attorney.
I get it.
No legal advice.
Well, what do you
but
get?
a trust isn't going to protect you like an LLC will.
Uh-huh.
When you're talking about liens. So if all of a sudden, if my property's in an LLC, and it has to be at least a 2-member LLC, if my property's in an LLC and a lien pops up against me as an individual, then that lien technically should not attach to the property. But there's, when it comes to the trust, if it's in the trust, it's a gray area, but for the most part, those liens will attach. The trust won't protect you from that.
Okay. Okay, that's good. That's good to know. And I know you mentioned there was a certain type of title insurance that investors should have. I know we wanted to get into that a little bit.
Right.
What is, so when you're buying, is this for buying investment properties?
Yeah,
you should have
right. So if you're an investor and you're going to flip a property, and I did a video on this one too, but the interim binder. Most investors know about a binder. Now, a binder is not an actual title policy. What a binder is it's a promise to issue a title policy to the final purchaser, right? So if you're an investor and you buy a property today, right? You're the buyer in this transaction. So you're basically not controlling title probably. You're the buyer. You went with, ABC Title Company. And when you buy that property though, you tell escrow, hey, I want to purchase a binder. And escrow will say, okay. They'll tell title, hey, make sure to purchase a binder on this transaction. So what that means is that title company is going to hold on to that policy basically. Instead of right away the deal closes, they work on your title, the homeowner's policy for the buyer. Instead of them sending that right away to the investor, okay, here's your homeowner's policy. You're basically telling that title company, okay, hold on to that policy. But when I flip it, I want you to use that policy to go to the end buyer. And so the way it works is we call it a binder in when you're the investor and you're the buyer, right? It's a binder in. You're going to pay. It depends on the sales price.
You're the investor buying the flip right now.
Right. You're the investor buying the flip. You're going to pay a couple $100 for this binder in, right?
Okay.
And then when you go to flip the property, now you're the seller. Mm-hmm. Typically, the seller is responsible for paying for that buyer's owner's policy. And let's say, it's a $600,000 sales price. That could cost about $1,500 in, an owner's policy title premium. But since you got that binder that you already, let's just say, paid $200 for, now we're doing a binder out, which is only going to cost you, let's say, another $200 to $300. Instead of paying that $1,500 that you would be on the hook for, now you're only paying a total combined of about, let's say, $400 to $500 instead of $1,500 or more. And I don't know. I mean, I think it's a way for title companies to get a second deal out of one transaction. You know what I mean? And it's saving a ton of money for that investor. And I always thought that most all investors knew about it. And I started talking to people when I realized that not everybody did. And it's funny because
binder out and binder in. That's a great trick. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I think a lot of title reps don't want to tell investors about them if they don't have to, because that investor has to stay with that first title company for them to honor the binder out. And normally they didn't choose title services on that one. And so
they lose the deal.
So they'll lose the deal when they flip it if that's their client. But I just try to be that guy that gives the right information.
Be that guy, man. Don't be the other guy.
It all comes around, man. It's like karma.
Yeah,
it's I think it's cold-blooded to not tell somebody.
No, that's a good way to save a bunch of money. The binder. Yeah. So I'm gonna call the title company when I'm buying my flip. I want to binder in. That's what I tell them. I want to binder in.
Binder in, just a binder policy. They'll know what it is.
Yeah, they're gonna know what it is. So we talked about that. And then we'll talk a little bit about the major title insurance companies in America, such as, First American. I got First American, Chicago, Fidelity listed on there. I know we talked a little bit about it before, but I know you guys, what's the status of your company now in terms of, because you said you can use different underwriters. I didn't quite understand that. Are you guys
So we're not a national underwriter. Are you brokering?
What are you guys doing here?
We're like what's called an agent. So it's similar to a broker, if you want to say. There's multiple national underwriters out there, and each title company will, create contracts with all these different national underwriters so that they have options, and that's the benefit of working with a title company that's an agent because if you have a tricky file and someone's like, oh no, in order to close this, we're going to require all of it. They could make it super difficult, where I say, okay, that's fine. Well, let me see what these other underwriters say, because someone else might say, you know what? I think the liability here is small. We're okay writing over it. And then boom, okay, let's switch it to this underwriter because this is the path of least resistance. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I just think there's a tremendous benefit. I think people don't understand. I think a lot of people think, and again, I've worked for the major underwriters before. And I've been in the business for almost 30 years now.
Yeah.
And, to me, title's title. What should really matter is service, because you can get a title policy from any of these national underwriters by going through a smaller title company that acts as an agent. Because, again, we have contracts with all the national underwriters. Some people will say, hey, who underwrites you? And I'll give them a list, and they'll say, hey, can we use this underwriter? I'm just like, no problem.
People really ask you that?
Every once in a while. There's certain people that are picky.
That'll say something about that person, though. I hate those guys.
I have my favorites, and I kind of stick with my favorites.
Exactly.
But if someone says, hey, they want, to use, I'll say, okay, no problem. And then if the requirements come back and they're heavy, I'm like, hey, well, you picked this underwriter, but these are, do you want me to switch it back? Okay. And then we have the leverage to switch on the fly almost. You know what I mean? If it's not like we're stuck just because we open the order under one of them, we can sort of switch on the fly. So I like it, the flexibility of that. I think it's invaluable. And it makes my life easier, because I'm not beating my head against the wall trying to get one underwriter to approve something. In order to close a transaction, I can say, okay, well, if this so-and-so is not going to do it, well, let me run it by everybody else and see what they think.
Just kind of, see who takes it and stuff like that. Well, this podcast is a little bit about entrepreneurship, and I don't know if you know about this subject. Another subject I'm not 100% sure if you know about, but for example, you guys are an agent right now. Like you said, it's kind of like a broker. Do you know how to start an agency or how to
title company?
Yeah, because I know I've talked to some people and they actually they own title companies. I'm like, how do you own a title company?
I will say I have zero idea how to start a company, but I have had people ask me about it. But I mean, no one's gonna want to go. I get it. You can start up. You have the investors. You can create a title company. I'm assuming there's a ton of money in it.
But that's the big title companies. I assume what you guys do would be a little step below that, basically, in terms of regulation.
I mean, I don't know. I really, honestly, I couldn't even answer that. I would not know what it would take to start up a title company, and I've never even thought about it, to be honest.
It's all good. I just, because like I said, I've heard of people, starting title companies, and I thought it might be a good endeavor, but I mean, if it's not your subject.
Well, I know, it's the one thing that is tough in the industry is when real estate offices want to have their own in-house title company. There's certain real estate offices that will have in-house title. Sometimes it's their own title company that they've built up and started, or sometimes their partnership with another title company. And that's always the tough one, because that's an obstacle that you have to get over. And I do work with many of these brokerages that have technically in-house title. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that they have to use them, and most of the time, I'm not saying all the time, but most of the time the service isn't great, and so they respect my service compared to what it looks like they're being offered by the in-house title. But that's definitely an obstacle. I think it's kind of similar for you guys if you're trying to work with a brokerage or trying to get in with a real estate brokerage and they have an in-house lender. Yeah, it's basically the same thing.
It's similar. It's worse when they own the mortgage company,
right? Or escrow too, for escrow people.
Escrow, same thing, because everybody's trying to put everything in house. So it is harder, and I don't. No, from my experience, they're not as good. They're not as flexible. It's not what they do. It's an added feature to the brokerage for the owner to make more money, I feel like, but they're not going to be the best at it. So, it is what it is. Well, one of my last questions is just talking about property taxes in general. Do you know any, other than what we've kind of already discussed, any tips or tricks you can kind of give the audience when they're filling out their PCOR, or when they're, because people call me, like I said, I called you recently about that reassessment, and this guy's literally scared to death of his house getting reassessed. Right. And because everybody's bought their properties for literally like 200 grand and now they're worth like $1 million.
Yeah.
So they don't want their taxes to go up. So when they're doing, when they're adding people to title, or when they're really filling out the PCOR, which is the, I don't know, what is
Preliminary
change of ownership form, which, for those you don't know, it's a form you fill out anytime you do a deed, right, on a property. Is there anything that, or any tips and tricks you could kind of share?
So, I mean, with the PCOR, you basically have to fill it out exactly to what that transaction is. So there's no tips or tricks on that form. But, my biggest suggestion, like I mentioned, is call the tax collector, call the county assessor, go over that situation. The parent to child transfer, or even they have the parent to child transfer form, right? And that's the way the form reads. However, it can be reversed too. It can be child to parent, and you can get your reassessment excluded. So it's an exclusion form for that. You can also do grandparent to grandchild, but the parents that are in between have to be deceased. Has to be primary residence of the parents, primary residence to the child. Or like we mentioned, putting the property in your trust has to be the same proportionate interest of the people, basically coming off title going into the trust. Same with the LLC, corporations, partnerships, whatever. But anything other than that, adding your brother to title, taking someone off title, it can flag reassessment. I mean, there's just no two ways about it.
So and that's why the county, go over it with the county.
I go over it with the county because I think people get too comfortable recording deeds out of whatever situation they're dealing with in their life, and they record it, and then boom, they get hit with a reassessment, and trying to fight that reassessment. I mean, especially if your property hasn't been reassessed since like the 70s or the early 2000s, property values now you're going to get reassessed to fair market value.
Right.
And I mean, it can just it'll ruin things. I mean, it's thousands and thousands of dollars more on your taxes just because you recorded a deed that maybe you shouldn't have. But I just think people need to, before they record deeds, get advice. Talk to the assessor, talk to the CPAs and attorneys. Call me. I'm happy to help. So.
Well, I know his contact information is going to be in the description if you guys are watching this on YouTube. So you'll see Rod's information. But actually, Rod, the last question that I have for you. So I'm in a situation now, and I might have discussed this with you. I got a woman who is. Her father just passed away. Okay, let's go back a little bit. Okay, so, obviously her father owned a home. The home was in a trust. Father passes away. Father passed away, I believe, recently. Let's just say like November. So all the money now, they sold the house in November. Money's now into a trust bank account after the trust. This woman is now using most of that money to purchase a new property. And she was talking to me about that she heard something or, whatever. She's trying to get her dad's property tax rate, again, from the 70s or whatever it was, for the new property. And the new property that she's buying right now, we're in escrow, and the new property is similar in size and similar in value and all that. I think it's around 800. They're both valued around current value. That's the problem. So she's trying to get that $230,000 value added to her new property. Her new property is roughly 800. Is there anything I can tell her, or is there anything that we can do to make sure that the property tax savings gets passed along from parent to child in a trust, actually?
So the father was deceased, and then she sold it as successor trustee?
Yeah. She sold it, as the successor trustee.
So she sold it as successor trustee, and then
she's taking that money and purchasing a new property.
Yeah. That's a tricky one, because basically if it was the father, let's say, he could technically possibly, depending on his age and everything.
He's an older man, yeah.
Right. He could sell that, transfer his tax base. That's part of the whole proposition. And he could do it. I'm not 100% certain if the successor trustee, I don't know how old she is and what that situation is.
She's not. She's like early 40s.
Yeah. I'm not certain that she should do it.
She's not old, basically.
Yeah, I'm not certain that she should do it. However, 100%. So like if you call the county assessors, some of these counties have an actual proposition department. I have a list of those phone numbers
This is
too.
LA. This is properties in
LA.
LA.
I'm pretty sure LA has their own separate proposition. I know Orange County does. And you can just call them and give them that exact scenario. I mean, it's so simple. A lot of people just don't know who to call or don't know that there's someone that can help them with that. But I'm not 100% certain if she can. I want to say she can. But before I would say that, I would advise someone to call just to be sure.
Yeah. So this is, obviously it's not 100% your subject, but I wanted to try to get your opinion. So anyway, what I really got out of a lot of this is really, you don't trust your title officer. Call the county.
Well, for when you're talking about taxes, anything taxes, trust me, like me being in the sales side, it's a little bit easier for me to talk about it. But if I'm a title officer, my answer is strict. Nope, call the county. I don't want to be liable for saying, you're not going to get reassessed. And then boom, you get reassessed and you call me back and say, hey, you told me I wasn't going to get reassessed. I'll always explain the way it works to people, but then I'll always say I'm way more comfortable with you calling the county assessor before you record any document, before, whatever, because I don't want them to only just take my advice, because I'm not the tax collector. They can do what they want to do. I have no control over what they do.
This society is quick to play the blame game, man. Rod said this. It's his fault. Rod, I'm going to sue you, Rod. What's your company? Yeah, so people these days are crazy.
I don't want to lose my 100%. I've been good. I haven't had anyone call me and say I did them wrong. So but I always, that's like the disclaimer is like, hey, call them. Call the assessor.
For sure. Okay, so people are now getting all into, AI, artificial intelligence. And I was talking to you earlier about the younger guys and the younger generation and kind of the future of the title business, basically. What's your opinion on AI in terms of like how it's going to change the title insurance business? What are you guys seeing right now in title insurance in terms of AI?
Yeah, so I think like with AI, for years, even like right now, AI is the strongest it's ever been. But for years and years, they've always been trying to do it to title in the sense of, getting rid of title officers, possibly getting rid of title sales reps as well, because they have what they say is like computer document reading computers, and they're getting smarter and smarter. So the more documents they read, the smarter they're getting. The last title company I left them because that's what they were doing. And I kind of saw it was coming, whereas, they were really trying to get into this AI and bring it directly into the title world and eliminate jobs. And in my opinion, I didn't really want to be part of that.
Of course you don't. Why would you want
to? Yeah, because my job's going to be gone. And I think what happened is when they kind of came over and they took over, they weren't really being straightforward about it. But I felt like I could read between the lines, and I saw what was happening, and that's pretty much why I left. But the idea was, streamlining everything. You open up a prelim and you'll have it in 30 minutes. But I think the problem from the inside, from like the title officer standpoint, honestly, man, I guess it could be done, but I don't know, because I think there's just too much room for computer error, and you're talking about monster transactions, $1 million transactions, and
until they start seeing claims,
trusting computers with this. And I just can't see it happening. I can now, because it's like I said, everything's happening so fast with this. But I think from like a title sales rep, or even for realtors and loan officers, there's a ton of value in learning to use it. I think if we don't learn to incorporate it and use it, then we'll be too old school, and the younger generation will kind of catch up and start using it so much that it becomes incredibly valuable. So I think we all have to lean on it a little bit, incorporate it into our business. But for me, I feel like the value that I personally bring, just because I have a level of knowledge in title, more so compared to some of my competitors, that I feel like I might be the last to go in a sense.
If the last generation?
Well, I'm just saying, like, I think, like, for instance, like things like farming and property information, property profiles, just general information, I can imagine that being on where AI can just handle that no problem. I think where the difficult part for AI is, every property is so individual, and all the past ownerships and the history of that property and that chain of title, certain things have happened. I get it. There's document reading machines, but I think you kind of need that human eye to review things, to make sure everything is how it's supposed to be. And if it's not, let me help you try to fix it. Let me show you what steps you need to do to fix it. I can't imagine that AI can completely take that out, or that it would be very, like the lenders and like putting up this big money would trust that in whole. But maybe, it's definitely something that's scaring all of us. You know what I mean? In
especially
a sense,
the younger guys, right? The younger guys in the business, I think it's going to affect them more, because you can take AI, and then I can cut out, instead of having, my thing is, I think it's going to happen, but instead of 4 title officers, it's 1. And they can now, the one title officer can handle 4 times the volume. So they cut cost, owners or whoever makes more money. But the people lose jobs, and I hate people losing jobs, especially to AI, man. That's like,
it breaks my heart.
But I guess you got to learn more skills. But the problem is, like, what can you learn? Like, I guess if you're a title officer, what skill can you add? What skill can I add to my resume that AI can't take away from me in title?
I think it's just the communication. So if you take away a title officer, are you taking away escrow too then? Because if escrow has a situation that they can't figure out what they need, they're going to call title. So what, are they just going to punch it into a machine to see what they need? You have to have someone on the other end that's reviewing this documentation, because again, every transaction is individual. There's most of the time there's not a blanket answer or document or whatever it is that's exact the same for all these different transactions. So you need those human eyes to review it, because we're looking at all sorts of detail, comparing signatures, dates, all sorts of things, and some things just don't match up, right? And we have to make judgment calls on lots of things depending on the liability. And man, if these big lenders are going to trust that and lend money and trust these computers that they aren't making errors, then I guess at some point it could be possible. But as long as it doesn't hit in my lifetime, or I can get past it, but it could. It's going so fast. I always tell myself, I think I at least got 10 years left to not have to worry about it.
The last 2-3 years is a big change in
I know.
AI,
so I could be completely wrong by saying that, but I think, but like I was saying, there is good parts of AI that I think people can incorporate into their business. I've seen one where, for a realtor, you can create a real estate coach where people do scripts and stuff like that. You could say, okay, put me in front of a potential seller. I'm going to have a listing appointment. We're meeting at a coffee shop, and boom, you have all these questions. And so you go through role playing with the computer, and they're so intelligent that they think of every question to ask you. And so as a realtor, if you keep doing that over and over and over, now when you really truly do have that listing appointment, you've had so many different questions fired at you that your memory, you're remembering it, what you learned from that little AI coach, and now you use that in real life, and it can be beneficial. But that's just like one thing. It does millions of things.
Well, they could do that for any industry. Actually, that, for some reason, that reminded me of like kids, because it could help kids with like history class or whatever, or math class, all the kind of stuff that they do. I think AI could really help with coaching kids. Just because my wife was talking to me about doing something like that for my son. I'm gonna mention AI. We're gonna check out AI. Forget about teachers. We're going straight to AI. So anyway, like we talked a little bit the longevity of the business. So and AI, you don't see the younger guys. You see them still coming up. You think do you think this is still gonna be a good field, like for people that are young, for people that are, I would say, in their mid, like somebody who's 25 right now has bounced around a couple, little jobs, like when you were probably around that age. And
it's different. I always feel like I'm completely opposite from most of my competition, most of the title reps I come across. A lot of them focus on, the farming and the tools and technology, right? And I have all that stuff too, but I think the younger generation really geeks out on that stuff and loves that. And I think that part, for that reason, AI can be super beneficial for them. if they take the time to master it and learn it and find avenues in AI that they can present to a realtor or a loan officer and say, hey, look, I created this on AI. I can do this for you. Would this be value to you? And it probably would be. So I think in that sense, as long as you're incorporating it into your business, it should be beneficial. But I think the ones that don't incorporate it, eventually it's going to cost them. So I think it definitely is something that, you gotta just start feeling it out, figuring it out.
Start incorporating AI.
Start incorporating it. Start figuring out little things, and then find someone that actually really knows a lot. Pay them to teach you. Learn as much as you can, and then figure out ways. I always say, like, with what I do, it's like, think outside the box, man. Like, when I got into sales, title sales, I felt like so many title reps just kind of do things the same way. Walking into offices, dropping off notepads, pens, whatever. I always kept thinking, like, man, I don't want to be like that. I want to just be this resource that they can't find anywhere else. I'm going to lean on that. I can do all that other stuff. People actually call you
because they need you, not because you gave them a pen.
Exactly. But I think if someone comes into it and says, hey, I've done all this research on AI. I've learned this incredible skill on AI. Do you mind if I show it to you and you tell me if this would be valuable? I think that could definitely work.
Nice. For sure. Well, anyway, I think I got out everything I needed to get out. I appreciate your time. If there's anything else you'd like to share.
No, I'd love any viewers to check out my social media. I do a ton of videos on different topics, especially for realtors and loan officers that I think are super valuable to you. It's called Title U. I'm on YouTube. It's at Title U 101. And then you can find me on Instagram and Facebook as well.
Nice. So yeah, guys, catch him on all the social media platforms. And Rod, thanks for coming down, man.
I appreciate it, man.
Yeah,
Thank you, brother.
Thanks.